Yesterday, I aired our podcast after the 2017 season with Chuck Kyle, and it was a great one where he talked about every season being like a book that you write. And this was my first interview with him, and went back through this one. We edited it and cleaned it up, and there are just some incredible things that Coach shares in this one. I don't care if you are a high school, college, or NFL coach. There are takeaways from what Coach Kyle has done in his career and how he has approached coaching this game. So enjoy this one with Chuck Kyle, head football coach at Cleveland St. Ignatius.
We're very honored to have Chuck Kyle as our guest today. Chuck Kyle is the head football coach at Cleveland St. Ignatius, and he owns an overall record of 290, 67-1, and a 61-12 mark in the Ohio State playoffs. He's led the St. Ignatius Wildcats to a state record 11 Division I state titles, and also 3 national championships in 1989, 1993, and 1995. Coach Kyle was named the Coach of the Year by USA Today in 1989 and 1993. He was also named the head coach of the United States' first junior national football team in 2009, Team USA, and they won the American Football Junior World Championship, which is to be held every 4 years. Coach Kyle does an outstanding job and sustained success at St. Ignatius by sticking to his plan, having a great coaching staff, and getting his players to believe. We're excited to have you here today, Coach. Welcome to the Coaching Coordinator Show.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's an honor to be here, and hey, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too. Coach, let's get started and go back to the beginning for you. What made you want to be a football coach?
Well, I certainly enjoyed as a young kid. Well, let's start even earlier than that. Okay, I was the youngest of 4 boys. So you can imagine every sport that we could find, we played. I can't remember really when I wasn't playing something in the backyard or down at the park or something. So athletics was an important part of my life, and I really enjoyed it. And, you get into high school and then went on to play at John Carroll. And as I'm, at that point, you have to be a little more thinking about a career. And you're at that point, well, maybe you go and be a lawyer, or maybe you do this. And I started realizing, I think I'd like to teach and coach. I think I really enjoy working with kids and help teach them some things, not just in the classroom, but also, the bell will ring, I'll put a whistle around my neck and go out and coach and run around a little bit. I'd be honest with you, when I came out of college, to sit there and say I plotted out that I'm going to be a head coach and do it for how many years, 35, 40 years. I don't know. I didn't think of that. I just thought about getting out there, running around and help kids with football. I also coach track. I find those both areas a great classroom also. So that's what I did, and it's developed from there.
Coach, where was your first job coaching and teaching?
Well, that's easy. St. Ignatius High School, and I've been there ever since. So I don't even know if I have a resume, to be honest with you. I got hired, very fortunately, and the day I went in to sign, it was a spring, and I was hired as the English teacher, and I was going to help coach with, at that time, the head coach is Paul Nemec, and I was going to be the backfield coach, which meant that you played you worked with defensive backs and offensive backs. Well, anyway, the day I went in to sign my teaching contract, the athletic director, John Wirtz, was walking by the gym. He saw me walk in, and just that day, the track coach became the assistant principal, and so he wasn't going to coach track anymore. So John Wirtz was walking by me and said, "Hey, wait a minute, Charlie, you ran track when you were here, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir. Do you want to be the track coach?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So that's how I was hired to be the track coach. It was all the wonderful interviews people go through nowadays. Mine lasted 10 seconds, and I've been track coach 40-some years, So
that's nice.
It's a little different back then, right? A little different.
Yeah, today you have to deal with a committee and come in 4 or 5 times, and yeah.
Yes, back for that job, it was no committee. It was just John Wirtz saying, you can do this. So.
Well, Coach, I know you're a student of the game, and what was it you learned in those early years as a coach that made a difference in your career?
Well, I think while playing, I learned a work ethic. I always had a lot of energy. Some people are high energy people. I always had that. I'd always be running. My recollection of childhood is I was always running someplace, just wherever. But the work ethic idea, that you have to put it in every day and put hours into it, and the idea of the value of repetition and something like that. So when I learned that at an early age, and I can see how it benefited me, I think that when you started getting into coaching, certainly understanding the value of practice, I think that was the first thing that dawned on me. As a player, games were fun. Practice was, double sessions, August. Can you survive it? But as I matured and got into coaching, I'd see how valuable every minute of practice is. And so I think that was the first thing I appreciated was practice isn't just jumping through hoops. There's a reason for every drill, and there's an important technique in every drill that you're trying to help a kid improve on. So I think that was something, when you say a really important idea, that I can definitely recall. When I realized that, then I became very fascinated, sort of learning technique from college coaches, but also learning great drills that could teach it. And I became very, I don't say fanatic about it, but I was always looking for that great drill that would teach this specific technique. And I think that was important for progress.
Coach, as you've progressed through your career, I know you've had plenty of opportunities to make the jump to the college level, and you chose not to do that. I know there's a lot of young coaches out there who kind of envision that as part of their career path. What's the advice you have as far as looking at those opportunities versus working somewhere that gives you a lot more stability and probably balance in your life?
Well, that's a very important question in the idea of coaching, Keith. I think each individual, it's up to that coach to honestly soul search about that. I always thought a very important idea. I'm a man of faith, and I think we get put on this earth and we have to ask ourselves an important question. What is it that God has intended for us to do? And be honest with yourself. Going on and getting into high school and say, hey, my goals is to get into college, and I know I could do a good job there, and I can go on and be, because once you make that move into college, you're going to be desiring to be the coordinator. And then if you're the coordinator, you got to work to be the head coach, and you got to be willing to move around. And that's great. There are some people that's good with that. The family has to agree with that because that's tough on them. I just went into this for the reason to be able to teach English and to coach. And as you said, yeah, there were times when a college coach would say, hey, would you be interested in interviewing for this and doing that? And I kept going back to, why did I get into this in the first place? Well, I wanted to teach English and I wanted to coach. So I didn't want to get talked out of that because I really enjoyed also teaching. I really did. I enjoy teaching English. So I didn't want to get talked out of what I really enjoy doing. And I looked at my young family and I said, well, to move around, because once you make that move, you're going to be moving around 8, 9, 10 different cities in your lifetime. I don't know if that was fair to the family. So I was quite happy with what I was doing. And I was fortunate enough to be at a very good institution, St. Ignatius High School. And so I think I'm doing what I was intended to do.
Coach, we talked a little bit about practice, and I've been able to be at some of your practices at the high school, and I really love how you guys run things. And there's a unique thing you do at the end of practice with, I think it's 10 seconds. I don't remember how many it was. Right. I know you just have a reflection there, but I thought that was really valuable to what we're doing rather than just getting caught up in the activity of, okay, we practiced today. You have a reflection at the end. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Keith. When I was a player at St. Ignatius and when I first came back as an assistant coach, we would always sing the alma mater at the end of practice. Well, to be honest with you, first of all, those were some of the worst versions of the alma mater I've ever heard, because by the time you finished practice, you were dead tired and the singing was horrible and everybody rushed through it. So it was sort of, okay, but I can see that kind of tradition. But when I took over, I thought, you finish a practice, and if you can, before you leave the practice field, if you can ask the kids to think about what is it that you have to work on for tomorrow after this practice, that maybe there was something you didn't do well, some technique that you're not doing well, or you're just not getting a certain play, whatever it is. Before you leave this practice, get that clearly in your mind that tomorrow you're going to work to solve that problem. And I always say, if all of us here, all these players, if we're able to solve that problem tomorrow, then we're a much better team. 24 hours from now, we're going to be such a better team. And so I always push that idea onto the kids, because you can't solve every problem in one practice. But if each kid solves one little technique, one little issue, we're getting better. And I think kids realized when they were able to do that, yeah, there's improvement. And I don't care what age you deal with. When people sense they're improving, you'll see them work hard. And that's what I hope was gathered by doing that 10 seconds at the end of practice.
Coach, obviously you think about a lot of the things you do and you're very intentional about those things. That all starts with a philosophy. What's the core philosophy that you developed that you live by? And really, this probably translates to your coaching in all sports and your teaching in the classroom, but what's that core philosophy of teaching and coaching you developed?
Well, I think when you say core idea, I always think that our mantra with the program is that I'm hoping I'm teaching a young man to learn how to prepare, and prepare thoroughly, to prepare mentally, to prepare physically, and to prepare spiritually for any challenge you get. At that point in time in that young man's life, there's football. And each week there's a big challenge, and, you set high goals. And okay, so prepare mentally and physically and spiritually for the challenge, because, football is a complex game. And that's why there's radio and TV programs and people like what you're doing, and people really do. This game is a passion for people because it's complex. Physically, to improve in the offseason, all the work people put in, there's got to be a reason for it. And I always believe spiritually, because sometimes you got to keep your faith. The Cleveland Browns right now, take a look. They got to keep their faith to keep going, all right? And things don't always work out, and you have to just believe it will and keep your faith, keep going. And so I think if there's one very important idea in the program is, come on, this is a football game. But gradually in life, there'll be bigger challenges than a football game. So learn how to prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually for it. And if you do that, then you can look yourself in the mirror, and hey, whether you succeeded or you didn't, at least you can look yourself in the mirror and go, hey, I gave it all I could. And that's what we're here for, to do all we possibly can. So I think that's the major idea I hope we get across.
Coach, building the team, building the program, having that entire unit that sticks together is an important thing to the success of your program. And obviously you guys have experienced a ton of success over the years. What things do you do to build that culture in your program?
When we come back from Christmas vacation, I'll be setting up meetings with each sophomore and junior in our program. Freshmen, I don't get a chance to work individually that much with them, so we have a group meeting. And I've already did that at the end of their season and just talked about the off season and setting goals and so on. But sophomores and juniors, they were I saw them practice every day. And, I talked to the assistant coaches, and what I personally meet with each one of those kids, come into the office, and we take like 5 minutes. And really what I do is look them in the eye and say, hey, take a look around. No one else is around here. This is just between you and me. And I'm going to look you in the eye, son. I'm going to tell you what you need to work on. And, that I'm going to be very direct to you. I'm going to tell you honestly. And this is where you're at. And I may have to tell you, at this point, I don't know if you're going to start. It doesn't look like you're going to start next year, but this is how you can help the team. And these are the reasons why. So it's a very, stark conversation, direct. But Keith, honestly, every kid I've ever done this with looks at me at the end of the conversation and goes, thank you. Because I now have, 8-9 months to work on my weaknesses. And at least now I know what those weaknesses are. And if I can improve on that, I'll contribute to this football team. And that's been, I think, very huge in what we've done, because I hate the thought that I would get to August, turn to a kid and go, hey, by the way, you should have worked on this or worked on that. And I think a kid would turn to you and go, well, why didn't you tell me last January? I would have done that. So I think that's been very, very important to the program, just to make sure the kid knows, hey, this is what you got to work on. This is where you stand right now. And let's do something about it in the off season.
Building that culture, it's always important to have that staff that's cohesive and stays together. And I know over your tenure at St. Ignatius, you've had a lot of those coaches with you. In fact, you don't have extreme amount of turnover that you usually see in this profession. How have you been able to keep that group together, and what are your thoughts on creating and keeping a coaching staff together?
I think a good coaching staff is guys that are good friends. I think friendship's important, and they like working together. And I hope I've created an environment like that where it's fun. Certainly when there is a position open, I'm not a guy that's in a hurry to find just somebody to fill in. I look for someone who certainly would personality-wise fit in too, because that comes to play. The idea that just can work with other people well. I've always also believed, and I think if you talk to the assistants, they'd probably tell you this, I want the coach to be able to coach. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not going to sit there and dictate to that assistant coach, you must do this technique this way. I want to hear what that coach believes in. And what I think my job is I'll talk to him about it. I'll ask questions about it. And maybe I don't totally agree with that technique, but my point is if that's what this guy believes in and he's able to teach it well, let's take a look. And go ahead, coach. So I do believe I've always been a coach that lets the assistants coach, and make some decisions like that. And then as a head coach, I'm there to kind of bounce ideas off and to share it and then discuss it. But I think an assistant coach has to feel like there's ownership to his area, and I encourage that.
Coach, the field's just a different type of classroom. What are the best things that you and your staff do to teach your players to have the understanding they need of your systems, whether it be offense, defense, or special teams, to have that understanding they need to be successful on game day?
I certainly think the way a practice is organized contributes very strongly to what you're talking about there. Over the years, I've had a lot of college coaches who stop by practice go, your practice, you really like the way we organized it and the way we work it. And, you hear, well, too many other programs spend way too much time just scrimmaging or just spending 45 minutes or an hour on team. And, okay, I guess you're getting ready for a ball game to some degree doing it that way. But when you're talking about developing and creating that, developing the young man's skills, and plus developing that group camaraderie, hey, the DBs, they're a group, they work together. Hey, here's the offensive line. There's great pride in the offensive line. What's important is those individual and group periods where they really develop a personality together. And I think that's kind of important and should be emphasized. All those at the snap of the ball, sure, there's a scheme, blocking scheme and a pass pattern and so on. And everybody's got to be on the same page. No doubt about that. But everybody's skills have to be sharp. And you talk about special teams. Well, you can't complain about your special teams if you don't spend a lot of time working with the punter, working with the place kicker. The snapper, holder, and place kicker are a team. They take great pride in what they do. And that's kind of the point I'm talking about. Your kicker can go over there and with those little metal holders and the platform, he can sit there and kick for 2 hours. That doesn't mean they're good. He's got to team it up with everybody else and take pride in it. So I think we've always pushed that idea, and I think it all adds up to kids getting better and kids enjoy working together.
Coach, you mentioned special teams, and I know in having watched a lot of St. Ignatius games, and this is something you certainly were doing a long time ago. I'm not sure if you still do it, but usually that first time out you would use would be for a special teams unit to kick a field goal. Is that something you still do, and why did you do that?
If we're talking about a game situation, I don't want to sit here and say, we'd rather score touchdowns and everything like that, but I always want to be prepared to get any points we can. And let me point out something, since we're talking about field goal, I think a place kicker in high school, more than even college and pros, is an extremely important weapon, because the way the rules work, and I don't think I'm wandering off here, but the the way the rules work in high school, a field goal. Well, once the field goal attempt passes the line of scrimmage, it is like a punt. So if you picture that, if you got the wind behind you and you got a pretty good place kicker, well, go ahead and try the 45, 50-yard field goal. Big deal. If he hits it right and he's got a wind behind him, maybe you get 3 points out of it. But let's say, okay, he didn't quite hit it right. But meanwhile, he hits it into the end zone. They can't return it, and the ball's on the 20. I've always thought that's fine. It's as good as a punt, and you may even get 3 points out of it. So I think you start training the special team guys to realize, one, they can score, and we like to take our chances more than just once in a while. And then number two, field position in high school. Your kickoff unit, your punt team, you got a good punter, you're gonna maintain field position. And as fancy as all we've gotten with the spread offenses and all that sort of stuff, in high school football, how many teams can put together a 15-play drive to go 80 yards to score a touchdown? It's extremely hard to do. So if you can maintain field position, it still leads to a large amount of your victories because you've pinned the other team down.
Right.
So special teams are key in that.
The original question was, at least it's something I observed, that you reserve a lot of those timeouts for the special teams situations.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was getting into philosophy there.
No, that's good. I appreciate it.
That's okay. All right. You're given 3 timeouts a half. It's an interesting statistic how many people don't use all 3 in the half. Most of the time, coaches don't. Now, if I have all 3 left and I feel I have a kicker that needs his time to really take his steps and whatever, get all set up, then I'll take a timeout, the first one. I've got 3 left. Okay, I'm fine. I'll take a timeout. All right, field goal. And I'll let the kicker go over there and do his little routine there to get ready, because standing on the sideline, kicking into a net, fine. It's okay. But to walk out there and put the little platform down and look up at the goalpost and go, okay, here it is. It's showtime. Some kids need a little bit of time to just go through their routine a little bit more. Now, as the guy becomes more of a veteran, the less you have to do that. But come on, we're in high school. You're going to have the kid maybe 2 years at the most, as varsity kicker. A lot of times he'll be a senior and it'll be his first really as the prime time kicker. So I do have a tendency at times to go, okay, if I have 3, I'll take that first one and let the kid get set up. Now, when there's only 2 left or 1, I don't know. Then you have to think about that, the ability to, have that 2-minute drill right before the end of the half. But, you got to save it for those. But if you have 3, many times coaches don't use their timeouts. So I feel like I should use them. They're there to be used.
Well, and that's a good use of it, I think, because it's points on the board, it's field position, it's all those things you talked about.
That's right. And again, when a kid, it's a high school kid, and the snapper and the holder, there's some plenty of technique there. They're not professionals. And, again, as much as you can sit there and on the sidelines, the snapper takes a few snaps. The holder, maybe your starting quarterback, who knows, he's been busy. And the kicker, he's hit it into a net. He's got to have time to kind of go out there, deep breath, get his steps, look at that goal post, get everything ready to go, And the more veteran he is, fine, he'll be able to handle it. But those younger guys, they can use a little time sometimes.
Coach, I know you have coordinators designated for every unit. What's your role on game day?
Oh, well, if we do a good job in game planning, and that means for me, whether it's on a Sunday or a Saturday, to sit down and I'm involved in the offensive meeting to break down the film and, okay, this is what our game plan will be. Then I go over the defensive meeting and we go over that one. I'm in on that meeting. Okay, so that's all set. Well, here comes practices. So at that point, I'm just making sure that we're getting it done. And if I see some things that hey, we got to do more work on this certain play or this certain thing, fine, that's what practice. Now, once we get to the game, in all honesty, the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator, their guess is as good as mine. Go ahead and start making the calls. We worked all week. And what I find myself doing and what I should do is just sit back and let them go ahead and start calling. I have faith in them. And what I'm doing then is I'm looking at what the other team is doing. And, okay, first of all, are they doing something that we didn't anticipate? Because, people put a few wrinkles in it at times and you're going, wait a minute, that's not what we thought they'd be doing. Or if there's some things that we thought thought we could do, but we're not executing it well, or we're having a hard time with it. Those are the things I'm looking for. Go ahead, call the play. Go ahead. I don't care. What's the play? Fine. But I want to watch what technique things we're having a trouble with, or what's the opponent doing that we didn't expect, so that thus by the end of the quarter, and certainly by the half, we can make appropriate adjustments. I think that's really my job.
Coach, I know also on game day you've been quite a motivator, and having both coached and having friends who have played for you, I had the opportunity to hear, back in the day they were cassette tapes, but of locker room speeches that you've had, and they were definitely motivating. What is your philosophy on that last minute motivation and talking to your players, right before they charge out those doors?
Okay, well, Keith, I got to be honest with you. Here's what I think it is, okay? If you're sitting in a locker room 3 minutes before the kickoff of a football game, and if the kid's not motivated at that point, something's wrong. I think they're motivated. I think they're excited about it. To me, a motivation is an attitude about what you do. In other words, an attitude. Hey, there's a football game in front of me. I love playing football. This is obviously a big game, and I've got a lot of energy. So to me, motivation is an attitude. The speech right there is not, to me, the reason why the team's going to go out and play a great football game. Here's what I worry about, and here's what I would say that locker room speech is about. Kids are nervous, and they're 16, 17-year-old kids. I mean, how many adults wouldn't be very, very nervous playing in front of 10, 15,000? You're in the regional final, you're in the state championship, and there's 20, 25,000 people there. It's on TV. Yeah, any human being's going to be very nervous. At that point, I'm trying to make sure that the kid forgets about that. Let's get beyond that. There's fear of making a mistake. Let's get rid of that fear. Get rid of it. And so what that talk is for me is for the kid to step above his fears and go, hey, whether I succeed, whether I fail, I'm going to be the man out there on the field doing it. And I can do this. I've trained to do this, and I'm going to go out there and have fun doing this and accepting that challenge. That's kind of what that talk really, to me, is about. They want to play the game, and they're motivated to play the game. I just don't want the fear of failure to get in the way, because that limits a lot of people. A lot of people in the history of this world didn't live up to what they could be because why? They were afraid to fail. And let's get rid of that and just go ahead and do it. So that's what that speech is really all about.
Coach, on the field, what would you say is your area you gravitate more towards? Are you an offensive guy or a defensive guy?
All right, now you are talking to a guy who has coached football for 40-some years. So,
I know that.
And I'm the head coach. So have I coached offensive line? Yes. Have I coached backs? Yes. Have I coached defensive backs? Yes. Have I coached kickers? Yeah. At this point in my career, I care about all the positions. Mm-hmm. I think what I gravitate to, people could certainly look at the idea that before I became head coach, I was the defensive coordinator.
Right.
And I think that's a fair assessment. And I still think whether it's high school or college, if the defense can play good football, you're in the game. If the other team can't score, you're in the game. And so that's important. There's no doubt about it. But I'm no running back, right? That's what I did when I was high school and college. So the offensive side of the ball still is exciting. And it sounds like I'm skirting your question, but as a head coach, I feel like I'm looking and interested in all of it. Now, the whistle blows at practice, and here we go, individual, right? All the coaches get their individuals. I will fill in where maybe a coach can't make it that day to that part of the practice, because that comes up. So I'll go over there and handle any drills or whatever. But I do, when everything is going accordingly, I will work with the kickers, because I think that's something that coaches have a tendency to put on the back burner at times. Right. They want to, there's defense, there's offense. Well, who's working with those kickers, and that sort of thing. So when everybody's there and everything's functioning like we can, I grab the kickers and we do a lot of drills, and that to me is important, because we've already talked about special teams. I think that's an important thing. Now then, as the practice progresses, I don't have the kickers kick that 100 times, so they're done really. They can stretch or help out with the practice in some other way. And now then I'm going to various different group work that I feel that something is important that we have to get done. So I kind of bounce around a little bit, but if you'd have to say what's typically in practice, I like to be a complete team. So while there's the offensive lineman over there and they got their coaches and then backs coach and the quarterback, well, here's the kickers, then I'll work with them because I want to be a complete team.
Coach, as we look at today how coaches are developing, it seems there's even a specialization by coaches to be in one area. For example, I know I've had offensive line coaches at the college level who really didn't understand the intricacies or how the passing game worked. And a lot of those guys don't get the experience like you had where you became the backfield coach, and that meant you were coaching both sides of the ball. How important is it that today's young coaches really learn everything that's happening on the field?
Right. This young man is saying, hey, this is something I want to keep doing. I really want to progress in this area. Then the idea of having the courage and the interest to actually coach something that is not that familiar with him at that point, doing something that you did in high school, the same position in high school, same position in college. That's all I want to work on. Well, that's very limited. And the idea of to become a better receivers coach, you better understand what secondaries are doing. And sometimes a good secondary coach could be a guy who was a receiver in high school. Why? Because he understands what the patterns are trying to do. So thus he can help the DBs get their reads, okay, pattern reading and adjustments. If I'm a defensive line coach, well, it's nice to know what techniques the offensive lineman's trying to do against your guys, because how do you coach how to break that type of blocking scheme or that technique? How do you react to that technique? So it's a type of game where to say I just know this limited area ends up really, you end up stonewalling yourself. You know, you need to understand a lot of different things in the game. So I think for a young coach, hey, you're offered an opportunity to coach and you go, well, I've coached receivers before, but there's an opening at defensive backs. Hey, I'm a young guy. Let's go do it and go to clinics, go visit Ohio State or John Carroll or BW or Oberlin or whatever. Talk to people and start developing expertise in that area. It'll only make you a better coach and a more valuable coach as your career goes on.
But we're going to change the pace here a little bit and shift the questions back onto you. And we'll start back from the beginning again. What's a mistake you made as a young coach, and what did you learn from it?
I think as a young coach, I didn't understand the importance of pulling a young kid aside. And if say there's a problem, you know, I would just in front of everybody kind of rip into it a little bit. And I started realizing, okay, what's going through that kid's head right now? Is he taking correction, or did I just embarrass him to the point that I've lost him? It took me a while to kind of figure out what's a more mature way of handling this. Okay. And I think that was one thing that I realized. I realized that in doing so, in what we're talking about, I started realizing, you know what? I'm not Vince Lombardi. I'm not Nick Saban. I'm Chuck Kyle, and I have a personality, and this has to fit my personality. And if I'm trying to be somebody else, all of a sudden I'm going to be a different personality out on the practice field. Well, you know what? Kids see through that, and I think kids, you lose them because they're going, come on, he's being a phony. If I can just be myself and coach the way I should, and keep in mind that, you know, for that kid, who knows what else is going on in his life. And maybe he's not as focused as he should be this week. Well, maybe there's another reason why, and how I correct that may be important, how I react to that. Or maybe I'm just adding gasoline to the fire if I don't realize, hey, there's some other things going on in this kid's life, and I'm not helping him by what I'm doing. I don't know. I think hopefully I'm making myself clear. Sometimes you can just react in a way like, hey, you're not understanding what I'm doing. And, okay, wait a minute. There may be a reason why. It's just the kid doesn't have his focus right there. So I think I've learned be myself, be open to help the kid. I think my job is to help the kid out there, not be the dictator of showing my brilliance in football, because that's silly. I mean, that's not why we win. It's because we like working together, and the kids like working with me, I hope, and I like working with them.
Coach, what's the best advice you've received in your career?
I think something what we just talked about would be there is to actually be yourself. What's your personality? Know thyself. You know, as Emerson and Thoreau would tell you, be yourself. Don't be a phony. Be honest with what you can contribute. Look at coaching and look at teaching as, hey, how can I help you, kid? I know even in the classroom, a lot of times I go, look, kids, why am I here? I'm here to help you. Okay. Now you got to want to be helped. You have to want to do well. But if you want to do well, I'm here to help you. So let's work together on this. Okay. And I think that's kind of it. That doesn't sound like someone who has a big ego, because it isn't. I gave up on, threw the ego in the back seat a long time ago. Don't worry about that stuff. But try to develop a good atmosphere in whatever you're doing. And I think I've learned that over the years. I think that was good advice that I got. And talking to guys like, Lou Holtz and so on. I mean, Lou Holtz is a comedian too, Mm-hmm. He could rev it up, but kids, he's a funny guy, And why? Because that's Lou Holtz. If you ever heard him talk, he has a great sense of humor, and people love Vince Lombardi, but Vince Lombardi was, he would fire and brimstone a bit, but that was his personality. So everybody respected it. So I think, be yourself is kind of an important thing that I've learned, and good advice that I heard from experienced people.
Coach, what advice would you give to the young coach just starting out in this profession who wants to make it long-term and make this a career? What would you tell him?
Okay, well, I would tell him if he is getting into this business because he thinks he's an expert on the X's and O's, if that's the reason he's getting into it, he's getting into it for the wrong reason. Because, come on, who are you kidding? Great, you can come up with some creative ideas. Look, you exchange video with your opponent, and they're going to see what you're doing. Okay, so let's get above that ego trip of, I'm an expert, and that's why I'm getting into it. Why are you getting into this game? Well, you're getting into the game because you like working with people and helping them become better. You find the game interesting, because it is. It's a very challenging game as far as, mentally. It's a game where there's every snap of the ball. There's 22 variables. There's 22 kids out there, and it's amazing what can happen. But you'll enjoy that challenge, and you love working with young people. That's the key thing. If that's what you want to do, priority, then go into coaching and go into teaching. It's important.
Coach, I know you've read a lot of books as an English teacher. What's one that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, okay. It's interesting. I've gotten into a lot of history. Though I teach English, I've enjoyed biographies a lot. I've enjoyed that. I think there's some great value in reading biographies, say about a George Washington or an Abraham Lincoln. I think we can all look at them and here, there's President's Day, and you look at those two, but take it a step further and read what those guys did as leaders. They, both of them, threw their egos in the backseat and did what they had to do in a very difficult situation. And it was a very humbling situation for them. But they kept their priorities because they believed in the community, which was their country. When you talk about self-sacrifice, because coaching, there's a lot of self-sacrifice. Very tremendous examples. When you read very, very thorough biographies on those two men, it's just fascinating. Great examples of leadership and what it really means. Because leadership, people forget that you're told to serve when you're a leader. And what's in the heart of that for both Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, they certainly took that word to heart, that they served. And if you're the head coach of something, well, you know what? You're serving those young men and trying to get them better. And I think any thorough study of those two would be very valuable for anybody getting into a leadership situation.
Coach, you have your hands full with football, track, English classes. I mean, you are truly a teacher and a coach. You don't have a situation where you don't teach all day long. You're teaching all day long, a full load, and now, going out and coaching in the spring, winter. You have your winter workouts, etc. So why would you take on a role as you've done in other areas as well? So you've been the national team coach for USA Football. You're a youth advisor for the Cleveland Browns. You're a master trainer and involved in heads-up football. You do so many things now outside of the game. How are you able to do that, and why?
I've always had pretty high energy level. I'm just by I don't know. It's the way it is. I've always needed to stay busy, but let's go beyond that. I think all these things you talk about has been a progression, a step-by-step progression. And my wife and I talk about this. If you look at the things I've done, you go back, the things you mentioned, most of the things were volunteer, or you'd get your expenses paid for, something like that. At that time, I thought it was an interesting thing. It was an interesting thing to coach the national team for USA football, to be the head coach of the United States team. It was interesting. I mean, they paid your expenses. And yeah, it was like 3.5 weeks out of your life. But it led to getting to know people from all over the world. And it led to a good relationship I have with USA football. And thus it led to I have a chance to meet some great coaches, pro coaches and college coaches. It's certainly been the next step to help with youth programs, and the chance to meet Jimmy and Dee Haslam, owners of the Cleveland Browns, who have a really strong interest in helping youth in the state of Ohio. And they own the Browns, but they really want to help. And all these things kind of connected together. You look at another interesting challenge. I think people, well, at least I always look at it. You get some energy with the next challenge, and how I can organize my life. Well, that's up to me. But I've always liked the idea that there's a new challenge, and when you get excited about that really is important.
Coach, with all the things you do, I think you've learned quite a bit of creating that balance in your life with your family, with your faith, with your health. What advice do you have to coaches to be able to balance those types of things with a profession that demands a lot, but also has so much of our passion and attention? Well,
there's no doubt about it. People can get so worked up about it that it just takes over, especially in the age of computer now. I think it can take over your life a little bit, because you can always go on huddle.com and see a few more game films. The resources now, you have to be a little careful, I think, because you can end up getting almost hung up on it you're not dealing with your life. There's an important idea that there's time to work, and then there's time to just stop the meeting. Just say, all right, that's enough for today. Yes, we can sit here and talk another hour about, do we block this way, or do we blitz this way? No, let's stop right now. Let's just go home, get away for a while, get to our family, and then come back refreshed and take a look. And I firmly believe in that. I don't like the idea of meeting just to meet, okay? Hey, we work really hard at something. We met for 5 or 6 hours. Well, maybe you didn't need to meet for 5 or 6 hours. And maybe that was counterproductive, to be honest. So I've always tried to realize, if we're going to meet, let's sit here and get it done and do it effectively, because that's being efficient. And I think the key word to the answer to this question is understand what efficiency means, and the idea of being effective in the time that you're working.
Coach, I know your work with USA Football certainly does some things to impact the game in a positive way and maybe address some of the concerns about the future of the game. But what are your concerns about the future of the game, and what ideas do you have to address those?
I have a concern about the game, and I'm using a lot of my time at the age I'm at. I'm not saying I'm a young guy anymore. I'm not 30 years old, but at the age I'm at, to address concerns that people have about the game now. So you're asking an important question. What concerns do I have? All right, the concern number one is, though this game is America's passion, and it is. Baseball can say it's the American game, but what is America's passion? Americans' passion is football. It's just the truth. You can look at the bowl games being played. You can look at the national championship games in college. You can look at the Super Bowl. It's America's passion. But the game can't be, I love the game, but I don't want my son playing it. That's where there's a problem. So to address it, one thing we're working on, the Cleveland Browns are helping pilot certain programs. What we're noticing is a number of young kids, 6 years old, 7 year old, they're playing flag football. So they're having fun. Now, what does football do? Well, the next step from flag football is 11-man tackle football. Now, what we notice right there is what? There's a drop off in participation of those young kids, because parents think, well, my son's too young for that. Let's wait a few years and then get back into it. Well, that could be a problem, and that has shown to be a problem. If you take a look at baseball, a kid will start with hitting it off the tee, hitting the ball off the tee. Well, what's the next step? Well, the next step is coach's pitch, where his coach tosses the ball to the kid and he hits it. notice they have a progression. Basketball, the ball is smaller, lower rim. It's 3-on-3 for the younger kids. Hockey for those real young kids, they play half a rink, but what sport has not made an adjustment? It's football. Mm-hmm. So I know I just went through a long situation there. Browns are helped sponsoring this and piloting it. It's actually a modified tackle program. And what that is a good transition from the flag football to tackle football. So instead of 11 guys out there, no, there's seven or eight, but 7 we're working with. So there's 3 linemen, there's a tight end, he could be a split end, and then you have 3 backs, however you want to do it. You can flank one guy out or both guys out with just the quarterback, whatever. Now, the field, you bring the sideline in. So the sidelines are actually the top of the numbers because little kids, the field we play on, it's way too big for them. It was not designed for little kids. It was designed for big guys. So you bring the field in a little bit. Like I said, the sidelines are the top of the numbers. And what does that do? One, when there's only 7 guys out there, there's hardly any pileups. It's good fundamental heads-up tackling. There's not as much momentum. If you watch a young kid's game with the big field, if you have the fastest kid in the league, get him the ball because he'll take off, run around the sidelines, and outrun everybody for a touchdown. It's kind of silly, but that's what happens. But you limit the field, there's not as much momentum, and the kids are playing good football. It's 1st and 10. There's a lot of rules that could go in with it, but we're starting to try to develop a logical transition before you go to 11-man football. And thus we can keep kids involved with the game because I think that's at the heart of this problem, okay? Because people love the game, but they're afraid, kids could get hurt. Well, to develop the skills, we need the kids to keep working at the skills. And so we need that transition. So I wandered off. I didn't wander off. No. I kind of elaborated here, but I think there's something really important that we're working on. Everybody, we've scrimmaged last August at Solon with the youth groups, with North Royalton, did it at Parma. The kids loved it. Parents who saw the game loved it. They said, I'd have my kid play this, no problem. And picture the transition. Obviously, we want to get to the 11 on 11, but there's that confidence builder, and those kids are in full equipment when they're doing this modifying, so they're getting used to tackling, used to wearing the equipment. So anyway, I hope people take a look at it because we need to make some changes and help develop the skills in a little more careful approach.
Here's the final question, and I think you have a lot of input into this one as far as what you've been able to do to help your teams find the winning edge. You've have an unprecedented 11 state championships in Ohio. You have 3 national championships. What's the one thing that you would say gives your team the winning edge?
As much as people want to go, well, it's a private school, I invite anybody to take a look at whatever we do, because I think if you talk to the commissioner of the state of Ohio, they'd say they respect our program immensely. I invite anybody to do that. So what's the issue? Come August 1st, we'll have 200, and I'd say around 250 kids, something like that, come out for football. Many of them have played, youth football. Some kids come out, they haven't played. They just didn't get involved, but we say, come on out. I think that's the key thing. I think kids still when they come to St. Ignatius High School, and they got to come to our school for the right reason. Believe me, it's every kid that goes to our school is going to go to college, but they want to try football. They want to do it. Great. We get a lot of kids out, and you get 200 some kids out there, you're going to find some football players. Okay. I don't care what they did in grade school because, kid in grade school could be 5'6". By the time he's a senior, he's 6'2", and that happens a lot. So I think that's a key thing, that the culture is, hey, it's a cool thing to go out for football. And if it's any high school that has that, they're going to have good teams.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time with us today and all the insight that you've shared into the game. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Probably the best thing is just email. My email is cckyle@ignatius.edu because I'm not always at my desk and I'm not always able to get on the phone. But if I get an email, that gives me the flexibility to get back to the person.
Coach, thanks again for your time. It's always great to talk ball with you, and I'm sure I'll see you here this offseason. And thank you for all you do.
Okay. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Stay tuned for all we have coming for you in 2022 Follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski, and check out coachingcoordinator.com for information on coachesclinic.com, partnership with all the state associations to bring you over 10 clinics, over 400 talks from this clinic season, all for one price. We have some discounts for groups and staff passes as well. Again, go to coachingcoordinator.com to check out the information on that.